Welcome back to Amplify Your Garden as a podcast. So today we're going to go through, I guess, one of my pain points, and that is weed and pest management. So that every year that seems to be my struggle, and this year is no different so far. So just a little personal backstory is I plant marigolds primarily around the border of my garden, and then I take the extras and I just kind of sprinkle them in.
Right.
And all of my tomatoes along that border are fine. If I have tomatoes the further away my tomatoes get from the marigolds, the worse they look because the rabbits are chewing them off.
That's funny.
Yeah, there's a handful of them that are just like, they look like this. They're just the stems. So we'll see
how those turn out.
If they turn out or if they are just goners.
Yeah, I know in the past for me, I've had issues with, I didn't plant marigolds last year, but I had kohlrabi on the very edge of our garden, and those didn't even last 2 weeks from the rabbits chewing the leaves off. But besides that, I think my biggest pest or weed would be crabgrass.
Yeah, and that one's tough.
Yeah, because it's so thin and it's so grass-like that, you know, you could spend a whole day picking it,
Right.
blade by blade.
Right.
So this year, I guess my solving of that is I used crabgrass killer a few weeks ago. Before, like, I gave myself time between spraying it and planting, and it worked. I mean, most of it went away. So,
and that's tricky too, because you kind of have to balance. Well, you may not want to use a lot of chemicals, but I think sometimes in your case, when you get on it early, and a lot of times maybe you can just hit it once, and you won't have to do it, and you won't have to do it next year. Just getting ahead of it and killing off those weeds maybe early on is tremendous. And I think that's a huge part of any weed or pest management is getting on top of it early and then staying on top of it.
Yeah, because years in the past, last year and the year before, we planted the garden, and we just like halfway through the summer, we just let it take over, and it's like unmanageable. The plants can't grow because there's so much crabgrass in it. And I think, so hopefully this year we've dealt with it early on enough that we can have a successful garden.
You can go on vacation and come home and it's
and it's not taking over.
I run into that too.
And I
go on vacation for a week.
It's you're back and you're like, where's the garden? But I think that, I mean, weeds, everybody's gonna have to pull weeds. It's not, you can't avoid that when having a garden, but I think you can help the situation and manage it better when you know, like here at the lab Luke made that mixture of, what was it? It was Epsom salt, dish soap, and vinegar and water.
Yeah.
And to kill the grass, which it did, pretty well. But I think that would also be, like, if you're looking for a more natural solution, you could try that. It might work. But my thought process was spraying, because it was the last solution. Like, I didn't want to have to spray it, but I knew if we didn't, it would just take over and it would be unmanageable. Like, no matter how, I could pick weeds every single day, but it would just be unmanageable. And I think my thought behind it was, if I spray it early enough, and with rain, and
it'll be gone,
it'll dilute it, and I won't feel as bad about it when we'll go to plant it. So that's the goal. And I think so that worked pretty well.
And crabgrass is one of those things where it is extremely invasive, and so it'll just keep spreading. Like, once it starts, it's really hard to get it to stop. Because it's super tough, and like when you go to pull it, a lot of times just those blades come off,
and you don't get the roots and anything.
Because the roots are so they grow like this.
So about around Mother's Day, we had tilled the garden, got it all ready, nothing planted, we just got it ready. And a couple of days after that, I could see, like, the whole garden, I could see them all poking out, and I was like, I'm not doing this again this year. And that's what I bought, the crabgrass spray. And it worked. So and now you're ready to push your garden in. I'm excited that hopefully we won't have to deal with too much of that this year.
Well, good. So let's get into, we talked about our problems, but why is it important to get, they're just weeds, right? But if they're not harming anything, why pull them? And I guess for me, a couple of reasons. One, I just naturally hate weeds. Like, they're just not pretty to me.
I feel like that's pretty worldwide concept. Nobody loves weeds.
But also the the nutrients that they take away from the other garden crops, and that's a huge deal, especially if you're working in a new garden where maybe that fertility isn't sky high quite yet. You're gonna need every little drop of nutrition
that you can get.
And the weeds will rob all of that nutrition, and also weeds can survive on next to none. So they are scavengers, but also if they've got a full plate in front of them, they're gonna eat it. So that's and then also it puts stress on the plant too. So if the plant is having, your garden plants have to scavenge for nutrients because they're competing with the weeds, or they're trying to get as much sunlight because they're competing with the weeds. That's just adding stress to the plant, to your garden crops. While a little bit of stress is necessary to produce the fruit, too much stress will just cause that plant to shut down and just maintain, and you'll never get a fruit because it's too stressed. So that's, I guess, for my perspective, getting ahead of those is super important. And then on the pest side, so I have a problem with rabbits, and if I don't have any leaves because the rabbits chew them off, then there is no photosynthesis that's occurring. So then I'm just left with my stems, and we'll say a quick prayer that I get some leaves back on my plants. When I think of a garden and I think of like the weeds and the pests that come with it, normally I feel like a lot of people focus on the weed side. More so, and I could be wrong. I know a lot of people have issues with living things eating their plants, like rabbits. And another one I feel like I've seen are those, like the bugs. Like the tomato. I don't know what they're called. Yes. Them eating the little starts or the little the new tomatoes coming on. Those is there really a solution to those, or is it more of just like you just gotta pay attention and pluck them off when you see them? It's a little bit of both. So there is a wasp that you can buy live wasps, and basically that sounds scary, but basically this breed or this variety of wasps eats the hornworms. It eats the eggs of the hornworms. So that's a really good way to get ahead of it. You're introducing a new insect to kill off the one that's harming. Yes, and that's the only thing that wasp does, is it targets those. That's what it eats. It eats those hornworms. That's more popular in commercial settings. More or less, to release this wasp out.
Because they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of these, not just a few on a couple tomato plants. For home gardeners, that's what I do. I just go out and pluck them off. Actually, step on them.
My son likes to do it, so I have him do it because I don't like worms. I don't like creepy crawly.
I'm the same way. Bugs. I feel like a lot of people are like, if you garden, you have to be okay with bugs. I love to garden, but I might be the biggest wuss when it comes to I
don't like the bugs.
Worms. I was actually last night, I planted our herbs in our raised garden beds, and I went to move the herbs to the garden bed, and I had a flat with all the pots in it, and I moved a pot, and there was a centipede about this long sitting in it, and I literally screamed, and I was the only one outside. I looked around, I was like, did anybody just hear that?
No,
but I'm not, I'm not a big fan of picking up worms and stuff. I know they're great for the soil, and I'm glad they're there, but I'll just stick to the garden portion of it all.
I'm that way too. And another thing that at least that I run into is what are they called? It's a moth, more or less, that'll eat my broccoli. So to do that, I just cover my broccoli so they don't have access to it. And a lot of, at least my experience and what I do in my own garden, is making an environment that is uncomfortable for those pests, or taking away that opportunity for those. Not necessarily with to get ahead of the weeds, a couple weeks before doing some kind of application.
The pests, I feel like that's where it comes in, where physical barriers. And I know in our herbs video, we talked about how certain herbs can help deter bugs and insects and buddies, and
just because of the smell that they release. So there are actually a lot of natural remedies in just working with Mother Nature. And I think that's where the best results come into.
For sure,
working, because Mother Nature's always going to win. So when you figure out how she operates, and if you can figure out how she operates, I guess, it's a good way to, one, add diversity to your garden, which is always great, but also provide some natural remedies for, and more so on the insect side.
Yeah,
I think the weed side, that's
like
very much,
it's something that you might.
manual.
It's easier when you get to a point and you're like, something's got to give.
Right.
Like I can't. And yeah, like there's always going to be different remedies out there.
Right.
But
And the weeds are going to be there.
Yeah.
The pests are going to be there. But it's navigating through some of that.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about navigating through the weed pressure. Because I feel personally it's easier for me to deal with the pests than it is with the weeds. Because, there's the physical barriers, there's the plants that deter them. Yeah. So for me, it's easier to control the pests a little bit.
Right.
No, I'm not dealing with like voles that are underground either.
Right.
So that would be a totally different story.
Well, in our area, I think it's very like area specific.
Correct.
Too. Yeah.
Correct. But the weeds, I feel like that's something that everybody struggles with.
For sure.
And again, just a personal story. So each year I rotate my garden crops, and I didn't think about it this year. I did it again, and I planted carrots right where my purslane patch, my weedy purslane patch comes in. And if you're unfamiliar, purslane, it's very low and it grows and it spreads like wildfire. And just like pulling crabgrass, I can pull that purslane all day long, but I'm just snapping it. And then
come back.
It just comes back, and it comes back with vengeance. So yeah, my carrots are suffering right now because of that. And as you garden, they'll, at least in my experience, there's certain patches of the garden that have this particular weed. And it's just in that area. And then another mistake I made is I didn't plant my carrots far enough apart to get my stirrup hoe in between. So now I'm hand pulling, but all I'm doing when I hand pull, it's almost like I'm just restarting them again. So part of my carrots, I think, will just be sacrificed.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents there. So plant your stuff far enough apart that you can get either a tiller through or your hoe, and then paying attention to where you're planting what in regards to that weed pressure. Now, if tomatoes were in that spot, it would be fine.
Because tomatoes,
they grow up and they can compete really well.
They're not grown underground like carrots. Yeah. So another thing that I think is important to talk about is like timing, like making sure you're giving yourself enough time, either every day, every other day, every 3 days, on a regular basis to go out to your garden and pull weeds, because you're going to have them no matter how much prevention you do, you're going to have the weeds.
Right.
But I think managing them and pulling them when you can, pulling a little bit every single day, it's going to make it seem like a lot easier than waiting every Saturday pulling weeds. If you do a little bit at a time, it's not going to seem like such a task.
I would agree with that, and honestly that's what I do. So it's either right when I get home from work or after supper when everybody's happy and we go outside. My kids are running around and I just take a walk through the garden, and sometimes 5 minutes isn't enough to go through and pull weeds. But sometimes it is enough to get the ones that are the biggest problem. Right. So, again, right now, primarily, I go straight to my purslane patch, and I'm just trying to keep them small enough, and maybe if I can stress them enough, my carrots will be able to overtake them. Now, carrots don't compete that well, so is that going to happen? I'm not all too hopeful. Yeah. But it is, I think, getting out and doing it often. And weeds are a lot easier to control when they're small. Right. Once they're big, so
that root system can be hard to pull out.
Right. That is 100% for sure. But in that same note, so once you have your garden planted, and like yours, it's freshly tilled. Right. That would be a really good time to maybe throw some mulch down, and that would be a more of a physical barrier, which. Right. I guess for me is a little bit more comfortable because that's how I control some of my insect pests.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that too. And this wasn't something that we had planned to do, but I think once we get all the plants in the ground, we're going to put some mulch around it because it's a great way to not let the weeds grow through.
Right. Right. And it helps with moisture too. Yeah. Like at the end of this week or middle of this week, it's supposed to get up close to 90. Yeah. With maybe a chance of rain later, but as it starts to really get hot in the middle of the day,
Yeah.
you know, when you're watering, it's nice to have some kind of barrier between the soil and the sun
Yeah.
to hold that moisture, especially when it starts to get
Super hot.
super
this summer.
hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we're in June now, so.
Yeah. Welcome summer. We've
Yeah.
got some nice heat coming.
Right.
for
After
sure.
like I feel like the last 2 weeks it's been perfect weather, like high 60s,
Yeah,
low
it's
70s.
been nice.
Perfect.
It's been nice.
Yeah.
Cold mornings.
Mhm.
It's almost like the fall, but
Not.
not. So let's talk a little bit about garden crops that compete well and garden crops that don't. Like we've kind of touched on it a little bit. And a couple of them that actually compete really well are things, think of like your big bushy plants, right? Those tend to compete well because their leaves provide shade. So the weeds don't grow as fast in shade. Like tomatoes are really good. Peppers are good, but peppers grow kind of slow.
Yeah.
Broccoli is another really good one that has excellent ability to compete. And then those leaf blades on the plant are so large.
Right. Not much can get underneath them.
Right. And if there are plants growing underneath, that root system for those, any of those plants that compete well is very.
I would assume that like cucumber, zucchini, squash, those are probably pumpkins are probably also good.
Excellent.
Because they spread a lot. So.
Right. But the thing with any of them, while those plants are still small, you've got to get ahead of the weeds so that way by the time the weeds come back, those plants are big and can outcompete. So weeds will oftentimes grow faster. Even if the garden crop can compete, the weed will outcompete because they grow faster.
That makes sense.
But yeah, pumpkins are, and anything that vines really, excellent at
Gotcha.
at competing. The things that don't compete well are often root crops.
Right.
Because if you think of radishes or onions or even carrots, kohlrabi, think of the tops of that plant. So what's actually outside the top of the soil, like onions, you've got just the little stems, so there's no shade.
Right.
And then all of the nutrition that's going to those root crops is in the part that you're going to eat.
Right.
So they don't have a real diverse root system to go and scavenge those nutrients.
Right.
They all have to be right there.
Right. And if weeds come up next to it, they're gonna probably not win. So
Correct.
Easily.
Correct. Yeah. So that I do think there's some, and that goes back to planting.
Right.
And that goes back to understanding your garden, and if it's the first year, it's a learning curve for sure. And actually, every year is a learning curve.
Right, you're always learning more stuff.
Yeah. But planning your garden and understanding, this part of my garden might take more of my time, or I might have to babysit it just a little bit more. But it all goes back to planning and understanding what your goals are and making your garden work for you, and then giving yourself the permission to go out there and maintain it. Because it does take time and it does take work.
Yeah.
It's not a
one day process, it's gonna be months of work, but it'll all be worth it.
Yeah.
For sure. The whole point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
all right, do you have anything else? I
don't think so.
Running out of things to
I think we covered a lot of the main concerns and questions and different issues that people have with pests and weeds. So
and if you have an issue or a question with a pest or a weed and you want some guidance, by all means reach out to us, leave a comment, or even what's your biggest problem, and then how do you combat that problem. Leave that in the comments too, because that could be helpful for us and really the rest of the viewers. So that's what we have for today on weed and pest management. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a video or you never miss an episode, and we will see you next time.